Thank you, Congressman, for taking the time. As many of you know, Congressman was born in Fort Wentworth, previously served as mayor of Pooler, Georgia. And during his time in the Georgia General Assembly, he used his business experience to make government more efficient and responsive to the people. He's currently in his fourth term and sits on two very important committees to our association: House Energy and Commerce Committee, where he oversees broadband technology and vehicle safety recalls, and also sitting on the House Budget Committee, he oversees the federal budgetary process. Thank you, Congressman, for taking the time. And I know we have a lot of people on the line, so I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Brett, and thank you to all your members for allowing me to speak today. I appreciate the opportunity. Lots going on in Washington, D.C., as is normally the case. I'm in the district now, just got back I should say this morning around 12:30, but we just finished up a week. We'll be in next week and the following week, and then out for the first 2 weeks in July, and then be back in for the last 2 weeks in July. And then we're typically out in the month of August. So we'll be out until after Labor Day, and then go back in Labor Day. And then that's really when we start the appropriations process. So that's really going to be a time, as you know, our budget runs from October 1 to September 30th. So that'll be the time that we really get into the appropriations process. I suspect that what we'll see with the appropriations process is probably another CR to get us through, kick can down the road, as we like to say. But there are some things that I think that we can look forward to. We're working very hard on the infrastructure package, and I'll go into that in just a second. But I just wanted to bring you up to date on a couple of things. First of all, it looks like we're coming out of the pandemic. It looks like the country is getting back to normal, whatever normal is going to be. I suspect that it's going to be what we refer to as a hybrid, a combination of continuing with virtual meetings. And I think that a lot of things that we've seen during the pandemic, like virtual meetings and working from home, are going to be commonplace now, and part of what normal is for our lives. And that's certainly something that's important, because one of the things that I have made a point of in the Energy and Commerce Committee, particularly because I serve on the Health Subcommittee. During the pandemic, we've relaxed a lot of our standards. We haven't cut back on quality, but what we've done is we cut back on red tape. And before we go back and just put everything pre-pandemic back into place, my hope is that we will review some of these policies and some of these rules to see if we really need them, and see if we can't do away with them. Give you an example: telehealth, which you're all familiar with, the way that medicine is delivered a lot now. I've actually got legislation that addresses telehealth and says that we've seen a proliferation of telehealth. Well, my legislation says that before we just go back and put all the rules and regulations into effect for telehealth, we need to review them first and see if it's really necessary now. Telehealth is an integral part of our healthcare delivery system now. Before pre-pandemic, it was not. It was something we were talking about. We need to do this in the future. Well, the future is here now as far as telehealth goes. So that's just an example of one of the things that I'm talking about there when I say I hope that we will look at these things before we just put them back into place. On a larger level, and a 30,000 foot level, if you will, there are a lot of things going on. We know what's going on at the border. The crisis at the border is certainly of concern, something that needs to be addressed. Not only is it a humanitarian crisis, but it's also a national security crisis. We've got to do something to get it under control. There's no question about that. Unlike the president, unlike the vice president, I've been to the border and I've seen it firsthand. And I can tell you, it is indeed a humanitarian crisis. What I witnessed when I visited the border was something that is truly a humanitarian crisis. Pods where children with the capacity is 33, and they had at times up to 5,000 children. And with the capacity of 33. I mean, it's just unbelievable. They're literally on top of each other. And I know that's hard to believe. How can you have that many people? But, you know, there are a series of pods there, and it's just something we have to address. And not only is it the humanitarian part of it, but I say the national security part of it as well. The amount of drugs that are coming across that border is something that's got to be addressed as well, because that infests all of our communities. And it is a problem that impacts all of us. It would be easy for us to just think, oh, the problem at the border only impacts those border areas and those border cities. Well, that's untrue. It impacts all of us. Not only are those unaccompanied children being sent and bussed into all cities all over the country, but those drugs are going to all cities all throughout the country. So that is very important as well. We see, rising crime rates in a lot of our metropolitan cities as a result of what has happened over the past years. I'm one who feels like, there is a problem, obviously, with this movement of defunding the police and those type of things. But I really hope, and I mean this sincerely, that as we come out of this pandemic, I hope things get better. I think that us being cooped up like we have has led to a lot of the unrest, if you will. And one of the things that we need to pay close attention to is the mental health of our citizens, because look, the last year's been tough. It's been tough on all of us being cooped up like we have, and we need to be there for each other. So that's something we need to pay close attention to. And of course, we also have the threats from China, from Iran. We know what's going on with Hamas and Israel. So the world stage is a concern, and certainly something that all of us need to be concerned with. Now, let's talk specifically about infrastructure, because infrastructure impacts all of us. And it really should be something that is bipartisan. I don't care if you're independent, Republican, or Democrat. We all need roads. We all need bridges. We all need seaports. We all need airports. All of those things are extremely, we all need broadband. Whether you're rural or urban, you need a broadband. And we all understand that. Now, there is an infrastructure plan that the president has proposed. Started out at $2.3 trillion. It's gone down now to $1.7 trillion. There have been compromises that have been proposed in the Senate. They've offered a compromise of right under $1 trillion. We in the House have offered a plan that is just under half of $1 trillion, over about $500 billion. The concern that I've got is what is in that infrastructure package. And in that infrastructure package, as I mentioned, I think if you were to ask everyone on this call, define infrastructure, you would get a number of different responses to that, but you would always hear people say that it's roads, bridges, airports, seaports, broadband. All of those things are what we traditionally think of as infrastructure. The problem that I have with the proposal that has been presented by the administration, by the president, is that only less than 9% of the total proposal goes toward those types of projects. The rest of it is something that's totally unrelated. Most of it has to do with the Green New Deal, the Green New Fantasy, if you will. And that's the concern I've got, is that, we've spent a lot of money. We spent trillions of dollars on the pandemic. I didn't vote for the American Rescue Plan that was passed earlier this year. In fact, no Republicans voted for it. It was a completely partisan bill. I did vote for the previous bills, and if I had it to do over again, I'd vote for them again. It was necessary during this pandemic. I get it. I understand that. Some of the programs that we had, the Paycheck Protection Program, a great program that, there were some problems in it and bumps in the road. There's no question about that. But to think that the federal government could come up with a plan that was so successful in such a short period of time, I think speaks volumes about how well we responded to the pandemic. But as I say, we're coming out of it now, so hopefully it'll be something that we respond to. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Operation Warp Speed. Being a healthcare professional, I'm a pharmacist. I have to tell you that for us to have come up with this vaccine in this short a period of time, I think will go down as being one of the greatest medical miracles of our generation. I know how long it normally takes. It would take 5 to 7 years in the past to come up with a vaccine. And to think that we came up with 4 vaccines in less than a year is simply phenomenal. And we did it and produced safe and effective vaccines. I know that there's some vaccine hesitancy out there. I encourage everyone to get the vaccine. I don't think it should be required. We live in America, and if you don't want to get it, you don't have to get it. But I would encourage people to get it. In fact, I myself went through the clinical trials. I volunteered. I thought it was I thought I needed to set a good example, being a healthcare professional, being a member of Congress, a member of the Doctors Caucus. I went through the clinical trials for Pfizer and was fortunate enough to get the vaccine. Of course, I didn't know at that time, but I found out later that I did indeed get the vaccine. So I kind of put my money where my mouth is. So I believe in it very strongly. So it is important. A couple other things that I wanted to mention, and I'll be glad to open it up for questions. If you look at this administration and what they've done in the first 6 months that they've been in office, and I'm a critic of the administration. I will tell you, the president's only signed 16 bills, into law, yet he, in the first 100 days, signed 41 executive orders. Now, look, executive orders have been used by many presidents in the past, but no one has signed as many executive orders as this president has signed in his first 100 days in office. And I just don't think that's the way our forefathers set out our country to be run. I think they wanted it to be run by a citizen legislature like we are. And to think that this president has signed in so many executive orders, it's very sad. We need to be doing these things legislatively. But a couple of things to keep eyes are to keep eye out for: tax increases. That is one thing. And how are we going to pay for this infrastructure bill? Regardless of whether it's $500 billion or $1.7 trillion, we still got to figure out how we're going to pay for it. There's been a proposal to increase the corporate tax rate from 21% up to 28%. That's going to impact a lot of businesses and impact everyone. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which I was very proud of, part of the Republican majority when we passed that. That's something that they've talked about letting expire. If that expires, then you're going to see the biggest tax increase on the middle class that we've ever seen in this country. And certainly I would hope that the administration won't let that expire, that they'll continue it on. So those are just a few things that I wanted to mention. This past week, or this week, I should say, it's Friday now. We voted to repeal the authorization to use military force that was passed back in I believe in 2004. I voted against that, not because I believe that we should still have it. I do believe it should be repealed, but I'm one who believes, and along with a lot of other Republicans and some Democrats, that it needs to be replaced with something. So it has been repealed now. My hope is that we're going to see it replaced with something. Maybe certainly not to the extent that it was before, but we do need something there to give the president the authorization to use military force if he needs to. Well, that's about it right now. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Congressman. Going back to your point, with infrastructure being such a large package coming out, ENC's done their part, House T&I has done their part. Senate Commerce has just put out their surface transportation reauth, and a big concern of ours when President Biden put out his infrastructure package was, again, to your point, how to pay for it, and the corporate tax rate increases from 21 to 28%, and our members are those entrepreneurs, the small businesses, and so those increases on taxes are making over $400,000 is, again, to your point, is devastating to us. And we're partnering with the U.S. Chamber and reaching out to a lot of Republicans and Democrats just to voice our opposition on that. And then going back to recently, the Senate Commerce reaching out or releasing their surface transportation bill. There had been rumors of a recall language being introduced on that. Usually that's on a yearly basis coming out of Blumenthal, and then a House identical bill from Schakowsky. We think we're actually in a good place right now. Blumenthal withdrew his amendment during the markup 2 days ago. So just wanted to flag that for you once it gets over to the House. We don't know where it is, if he's going to introduce his amendment on the Senate floor, but just wanted to flag it for you there. Schumer's big plan of going fully electric and, a potential cash for clunkers 2.0, I should say. And, our members are concerned because, used car prices are only increasing. And, if the infrastructure their infrastructure is not there to fully go all electric. It's just not there, to be honest. And so, that's another concern of our members. We have two questions coming in. Do you feel climate change is really that bad, and will EV cars really make a difference?
First of all, you mentioned I serve on the Budget Committee and the Energy and Commerce Committee, and I do. And on the Energy and Commerce Committee, I'm a member of the Environmental and Climate Change Subcommittee. On top of that, I also serve on the Select Committee for Climate Change. And I actually advocated to be on that committee. I represent the entire coast of Georgia, and I think it's important for someone who represents the entire coast of Georgia that I be on that committee and I have input. We've witnessed sea level rises right here on the coast of Georgia, and it is a problem. And I acknowledge that climate change is a concern. However, I would submit to you that what we've done here in the United States has been nothing short of phenomenal. Think about it. Over the last decade, over the last 10 years, we have decreased our carbon emissions in the United States more than the next 12 countries combined. In the last decade, we've decreased our carbon emissions in the United States more than the next 12 countries combined, while increasing our economy. I think we've done a phenomenal job. Do we need to do more? Yes, we need to do more. I acknowledge that. I acknowledge that we need to continue to move in that direction, but at what expense? That's my question. And look, you have to keep in mind, climate change is a global problem. I mean, we had a hearing in the Environment Subcommittee just earlier this week, and they were talking about how many coal plants are being built in China right now. And we were asking them, well, are they putting the scrubbers in like they should? Yes, they're putting them in, but they're not using them. And they're not required to use them. They're putting them into their plants, but they're not using them at all. And we're never going to solve this problem. Even if the United States were to go to zero emissions, it still would not solve the problem if the other countries don't do their part. Now, I'm one who believes that the greatest scientists, the greatest innovators are right here in the United States of America. How are we going to solve this problem? We're going to solve it through adaptation, mitigation, and innovation. Yes, we need to adapt. We need to mitigate. No better example than right here on the coast of Georgia. I mean, some of the policies that we have in place. Look, I use the example all the time. Two examples I'll give you real quickly. If you build a house on a slab next to the marsh, sooner or later, it's probably going to flood. I mean, we need to be smarter than that. Another example, we have barrier islands on the coast of Georgia. And one of the barrier islands is right here in my home of Savannah in Chatham County, Tybee Island. At least once a month, the only road going out to Tybee Island floods. It floods because of high tides. And if you hit the high tide on a certain phase of the moon, then the road floods and it has to be closed. Well, we need to adapt to that. We need to build the road up. We're talking about rebuilding the road now, and we need to do the things that we need to do to adapt to this and to mitigate those kind of things that we're experiencing now. However, I will tell you that I think that the Democrats have way overreacted to what is going on here. I'm glad we pulled out of the Paris agreements, and I wish we'd never gone back in with them. To think that we're giving China a pass until 2030 is ridiculous. 40% of all the pollution in California right now comes from China. And if we continue on the route that the Democrats want to go on, making the cost of energy so expensive that it's going to have an impact, particularly on the lower class and the middle class. And that's the last thing we need to do. The last thing I'll say about it is that I'm proud of what we've done here in the state of Georgia. We're in this top 10 in the state of Georgia in the way of solar power. We're the only state where we've got 2 nuclear reactors under construction right now. And also, we're #1 forestry state in the nation. We've got 2/3 of all our land mass in the state of Georgia is forestry. We've got carbon sinks all throughout our state. So that's important, and that's helping us. And that's the kind of thing that we need to pay closer attention to. But all this with the Paris agreements and, we've got to get to zero emissions by 2030 or 2040. That's just going to, I just believe that's the theory of the sky is falling, and I don't go along with that. But again, I do acknowledge it. I know that there is concern. Electric vehicles are a wave of the future. That's one of the things we have jurisdiction over in energy and commerce. We talk about it quite often, discuss it quite often. I've ridden in electric vehicles before, but what people have to keep in mind, I just got back from visiting a plant that manufactures roofing tiles. They use petroleum, obviously. They use asphalt. And I'm talking to it and I'm thinking, we're going to do away with this. I don't think some of my colleagues, particularly on the other side of the aisle, have any idea how much petroleum goes into our products and into how many products have petroleum in them in some way. So I'm willing to acknowledge that it exists and there are things that we can do, but I think we've done an excellent job here in the United States while still growing our economy.
That's a great point. I remember seeing when Texas had that massive freeze and a bunch of their wind turbines had frozen. It was there was a meme or a photo saying, "Oh, it's hilarious that the wind turbine froze, but there's a helicopter right next to the wind turbine spraying chemicals that the current administration was going to ban, trying to unfreeze the wind turbine." So I just find that hysterical. Another question from Kimberly White. She owns a classic car dealership, and they're experiencing problems with out-of-state customers who purchased a vehicle that don't have a title, only a tag receipt. And she's looking to see if we could include an addendum to potential legislation. I think I can work with your staff on this, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention when I circle back.
Please do. That is something we need to work on. Sounds like a state issue. Is it state to state, or is it something we could handle on a federal level?
I could circle back with her.
Okay, that sounds good.
Another issue that some of our members are facing is, of course, the CFPB and FTC. Recently, Lena Khan was confirmed to replace Rohit Chopra in the FTC. Our concerns, again, going back to, on the regulatory side, is the whole regulatory without rules or enforcement. What are you hearing on the regulatory side coming out of CFPB or FTC?
I appreciate you bringing this up because this is one of the most frustrating parts of serving in Washington, D.C. And please don't misunderstand me. This is my fourth term, my seventh year that I've been a member of Congress. And I'm still excited every time I go back to Washington, D.C. The shine has not worn off from me. But I will tell you, the bureaucracy can wear you out. And this is an example of it, particularly the rulemaking process, particularly when you don't have public input and the agencies bypass the legislative process, which we're supposed to be the ones who are doing that. That's what Congress, that's what the responsibility of Congress is. Nothing frustrates me more than that. People talk about term limits for elected officials all the time, and I'm fine with that as long as it's uniform, as long as it applies to everyone. But let me tell you, if you want to have term limits for elected officials, you sure better have them for bureaucrats, because I'm not kidding you. They just look at you and they just think, I'll outlast you. I'll be here and you'll be gone. And so that, and I understand they have a role, and I'm not trying to diminish that role or in any way suggest that it's not important. It is. But at the same time, there's no question in my mind that they overstep their bounds numerous times. And I think that there's no better example than in the two that you just mentioned there.
And then, going to, 2022 is just around the corner. I can't believe I'm saying that, but how do you see the outlook, because you're on the ground right now, and, in the past, when a new president comes in, usually the House flips, but what are you hearing and on the potential of that on the House and Senate side?
Well, first of all, the Senate's going to be very important, and it's going to be very close. I think that, it's already, as we know, 50-50, and the vice president's breaking the tie right now, which gives them the majority. But the Senate, you've got some announced retirements already. I don't know that you're going to see any more. I think that's probably as many as we're going to see right now. We in the state of Georgia have, and in Arizona, those are two races that were decided. Well, Georgia's was decided earlier this year, but it was just to fulfill an unexpired term. So both of those are going to be up. Mark Kelly and Raphael Warnock are going to both be up. The Senate, I think, is going to be very, very close. I'm very confident, and I think history is on our side that the House, that we're going to be back in the majority in the Republican Party in the House. Typically, in a mid-election year for the party that controls the White House, you lose 23 seats. And, they've only got an advantage of 5 seats right now. So we feel very confident that the House is going to split and are going to be, I should say, that the House is going to flip to Republican control. We're very confident of that.
Is there anything else coming up in energy and commerce that our members should be aware of? I mean, I know you guys have a lot on your plate. Anything that we should be keeping an eye out on besides what you have already touched on?
Big tech continues to be one of the things we're focusing on, and I serve on the technology subcommittee as well. And, look, I'm one who I've struggled with this, and I've been dealing with this, how much the government should be involved in this. I don't want to stifle innovation. I think the internet's one of the greatest inventions of our generation, but they have continued to ignore the fact, to ignore us in Congress, both on the Republican side and the Democratic side. The control that these platforms have now over our lives is out of control. And we are going to have to do something. We've had Jack Dorsey with Twitter, Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook. We've had Google. We've had a number of companies before them. And I've told them, look, I don't want to have to regulate you. I'm one who believes in the free market and free enterprise. I don't want to have to do that. But if you don't clean up your act, if you don't clear these things up, we're going to have to. And I'm afraid we've reached that point again, both with the Democrats and the Republicans. This is not a partisan issue. Yes, I believe that the platforms are suppressing conservative voices. Just look at what they've done to Donald Trump. I believe that. However, there are a lot of Democrats who are just as upset about this as Republicans are. So I think you're going to see something with that come up. I hate to regulate them. I really do. But, we've told them, and it just goes in one ear and out the other ear. And it's just very frustrating. So that's one thing you're going to see. You're going to see. And one of my bills that I think is very important right now, and it's called the Made in America Act. I'm a pharmacist, as I mentioned earlier, a healthcare professional. I think there's a difference in knowing something and realizing something. We've known for quite a while that we're too dependent on other countries for our pharmaceutical drugs and for our pharmaceutical needs. We've realized it during this pandemic. When you look at the fact that 72% of all our active pharmaceutical ingredients come from overseas. If you look at the fact that 90% of our antibiotics come from overseas, 90% of our ibuprofen comes from overseas, we obviously need to address that situation, and we realize it now after this pandemic. I've got legislation that's called Made in America that will give incentives through the way of opportunity zones and through the way of tax incentives for those companies, for those pharmaceutical manufacturers, not only for pharmaceutical drugs, but also for personal protection equipment, for masks, for gowns, and that type of thing, to repatriate them back to America, to bring them back to America. Much like we realized back in the late 70s that we needed energy independence, we need pharmaceutical independence as well. So I think that's the kind of thing we're gonna be addressing during this pandemic. And then, finally, again, infrastructure. Are we going to get something done? I'll be quite honest with you. Back during the last administration, I was disappointed we didn't get something done then. That was the one thing that I was disappointed in the administration that we didn't get done, was infrastructure. Because again, this should be bipartisan. This is something we all need, and we should be able to get this. I don't know whether the Democrats are willing to come off of all that other stuff that they've got in there. I know that we can reach agreement on roads and bridges and airports and seaports and broadband. But once you start putting all this other stuff in there, it just muddies the water so much. I'm not sure we can come to an agreement on that. But if we will just focus on true infrastructure, we can get this done. I'm confident we can.
Yeah, I most recently was at DOT, and the term we like to use there was shovel-ready projects. If they're shovel-ready, all for it. I don't have any other questions. So again, Congressman, thank you for the time. I'll be sure to circle back with your staff. Oh, one came in. This is from Darla. Do you see there being any changes to the state tax or capital gains tax before the May midterm election?
Yes, unfortunately, I do. And you know, look, these programs got to be paid for. And you know, how are you going to pay for these for these infrastructure programs and for some of these other programs that the Democrats are trying to push forward? The president's already said, the administration's already said, corporate taxes, capital gains, going after 1031 exchanges. I mean, I've used that before, and you know, and it's something that is commonly. I just met with the real estate or with the realtors earlier today, and they're very concerned about it, and with good reason. I mentioned earlier, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. If that is if they let that expire, that's going to be the biggest increase ever on middle to lower class people. So I capital gains and estate tax, I think you're going to see all of those under attack.
Thank you, Congressman. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Congressman, again for taking the time. We appreciate it. Hopefully we can do a live meeting in your district relatively soon, but thank you again and appreciate the time.
Okay, Brett, thank you. And thank you to all your members.
If you have any other questions, please contact NIADA's Brett Scott. On behalf of Pastime GPS, NIADA, and Congressman Carter, thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.